This is gonna be
All right,
troubles.
all right. Listen, I'm gonna hit the bumper, and then we can start talking. Here we go. One, two, three.
This is the INKPULP podcast.
Look at that. I love that thing so much that I'm compelled to say it every single time that I hit the go button. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 139th episode. Did I get that one?
Really?
I just wrote it down. You might be right on that. No, it was
I'm in range,
138.
buddy. If it's not dead,
138. You're one off.
oh, if it's not dead center, I was going to say I'm in scoring range. I'm in competition range. Thank you for joining us again. By the way, as you can tell, Matteo Scalera is not here, so we are going to miss his paid for bots. We are down to 5 viewers as opposed to his 15, but that's okay. Our guest is going to more than make up for it with
Yeah,
his millions and millions of followers and readers. But before we get to him,
billion.
your exalted host, Mr. Shawn INKPULP Crystal. Thank you for having us, pal. It's always amazing to be here with you forcefully. It's something that I have to sort of pay for in return because you've been so kind to me. I'm almost compelled to always show up every week.
Uh,
Also,
Eric,
without Mateo, it gets harder. You know what I mean? Like I can't imagine. Like it just gets dour if Mateo and you guys aren't being knuckleheads together. When I'm gone, it's okay because like Mateo and you can kind of find happy things to think about. If you were
Yeah.
left to yourself, we'd go back to old like
oh
episode
no,
3
no,
of the
we're not
Inkpulp
going
podcast.
back.
Oh my gosh, vertical slices up the arm. Okay, so that said,
Vertical slice.
ladies and gentlemen,
Already demonetized.
the
Already.
stuff that makes any podcast good, the ingredient, the how would you say the paprika that adds a extra bite into every dish prepared. Creator, writer, artist of Urban Animal,
Yes, sir.
Mr. John Amor. Thank you for showing up, pal.
Hey
Thanks
man.
for
Hey
coming,
Eric. Hey
man.
Sean. Now,
Hello.
be honest. Be honest with me because Mateo's not around and the
Yeah,
Fratelli brothers are incomplete. You wanted to take over the show and increase the Filipino quota,
no,
right? That's a
0%.
memo.
As many Filipinos as I can get off of this show, as a matter of fact, is my ultimate goal. I was trying to leave a long, long time ago.
Yeah,
Okay,
Eric's
so full transparency. This was not my idea. Like I said, my goal is to keep as many Filipinos off of here, including myself, off of this show as possible. It was actually Mr. Sean Crystal himself that said, "Hey, what do you think about John coming on and chit chatting a bit?" And I was like, like
Really?
I had a wound on my knee. I was like, oh, that hurts a little. It stings.
Eric doesn't want more of his people to suffer.
No, it's not like, get out of here.
Francis was like, nah, I don't know, man. Kind of busy.
No, I
Reino
figured
was like,
Spain has done enough. The Filipinos should just be left alone. You know.
Actually, yeah, we should reach out to Francis next.
Oh, look at that. You were Filipino of preference, dude. You were choice number one on the menu
I'll
of
take
the
it.
Mc-
I'll take
of the
it.
Filipino McDonald's. You
Hmm.
were combo one.
The Philippines.
Hmm.
John, how
Eric,
are
you're
you,
out
dude?
of focus.
Am I? There.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'll
It's
get
not
closer.
like
Look.
you. There
There.
you go. There you
I like that.
go.
That shallow focus is. I mean, we were talking about Urban Animal earlier, John. So clearly, we are not going to talk about it for the rest of the podcast. You were on hiatus for a little bit. Can you tell us what brought on that hiatus without going into any detail that might compromise your uh drug trafficking lifestyle? I'm just
Or NDAs or whatever.
yeah. What's
Um,
going on?
yeah. People got sick around end of last year. I'm not gonna get into boring specifics, but it was just getting a little difficult to maintain the weekly schedule. As you guys know, we release a comic strip on Webtoon that's 40 colored panels every week is the quota,
Mhm.
which is
Wow.
quite a big workload. If it's just me doing the art, I do line art and colors all by myself. So it's the final season, and our cast is huge at this point, like 15 characters. So the workload was getting tough, and we just needed a break. So luckily, there was a point in the middle of the season that allowed us to not too annoyingly pause the story and not cause too much, heartache in the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So we're returning in. We're looking at August, September to actually finish out the season, and it is the final season as well. So the story as a whole, 5 seasons worth, comes to a close. Uh, it'll end around next year, but we're coming back to bring that finale in August. We'll be
That's
concluding
interesting.
like roughly 5-6 years of work. So we're very
Wow.
proud of it.
Wow.
Can we get some numbers out of you, John? Again, whatever you feel comfortable with. When you first started Urban Animal, let's say a year in, year one, what was your follower count over in on Webtoon?
On Webtoon, nobody knew me on Webtoon because I
So
didn't
that's
have.
zero.
Yeah, yeah,
0 year one.
I
But
guess
okay, so
so.
the reason why I bring it up is because here we are now 4 years later.
5 years later.
5 years later. I only care about 4 of those 5 years. But let's say 5 years later, how many now on Webtoon?
On Webtoon, Urban Animal is 500,000 plus strong.
Congratulations,
God,
pal.
that's
That's my point.
amazing.
In
Dude,
Sorry,
five
subscriber
indie
count.
comics
years,
would kill for that type of readership.
absolutely.
That's
Congratulations, pal.
amazing.
That's 500,000 people that is like invested in your IP. By the way, let's not let's give credit where credit is due. Your writing partner is.
It's Justin Jordan from Luther Strode and
Yep.
Mhm.
Spread fame. He's got a lot of image books. And our letterer is Micah Myers, who's got a whole bunch of books under his belt as well.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
Congratulations to all of you. That's a quality. I mean,
Yeah, that's
that's
amazing.
nothing to scoff at.
That is amazing.
Congratulations, man.
John,
Yes.
did Justin approach you with the idea, or did you approach him with the idea?
I approached him with the idea to bring something to Webtoon. Actually, we had been trying to get a pitch off the ground for Image for years before that. And because we had known each other since like 2009, 2008.
Okay.
And then we'd just been coming up with projects, pitching to Image and other publishers left and right. And then we just got busy with our own careers. Like I worked on books for IDW, and he worked for like he did other Image books, did Marvel and DC stuff. And
Mhm.
then every now and then we would like just get in touch and then see what each other was working on. And then it just so happened that I had a Webtoon idea and he had Webtoon contacts. So then
Mhm.
we discussed the possibility of like pitching this or that to Webtoon. Our first series was rejected. Our first pitch was rejected, and rightfully so, because we had designed that thing for an image book. It was like it would have needed wide panels, and it just wouldn't have worked for the vertical scroll on Webtoon if you're familiar with it. And then I had a comic called Urban Animal that I drew originally in college, and I thought it would be perfect to sort of remaster for the format. And I pitched the idea to Justin. We put a updated pitch together, make it more hip, make it more modern, and yeah, things went from there. That was 2017, and then Urban Animal came out Q3 2018.
Okay.
So we've
So
been
can I
busy
give you
since then.
a little bit more context on that? John and I were really becoming close as friends, right? Like right at the beginning, like really like we were sharing family secrets. You know what I mean? I was inviting him over to the house from the Philippines. I said, come on over, just walk on over here. And
How
then
did you guys do it? Seriously.
all of that just dissipated when he got urban. He got too big. You know what I mean? He just went away. He stopped hanging out. He stopped returning my call. I would text him sometimes just to test it, like 911. You know what I mean? Never, never, never. I could be hanging off a cliff. He would never get back to me. But congratulations on the success of 500,000 plus later. You know.
Thanks,
Dude,
dude. Thanks.
truth be told, it started off. I think we met each other through when I was still streaming on Twitch, what feels like a lifetime ago.
Long time
John,
ago.
yeah,
Oh,
John is really good to have on because he keeps things light. You know, this is me when we were getting on Discord together while I was streaming live, and also just like hanging out and chit chatting. It made it's similar to us, Sean, when we were just yeah, we draw, but that's just the job. But when we're hanging out, it's few and far between where you get a chance to hang out with people where it doesn't feel like it's put on. You know what I mean? Where it's like more
yeah,
laborious than
yeah.
anything else. So that was John to me. And I didn't know he'd become such a popular guy. I would have kept him down so much more if that I would have put on the Mateo treatment on him if I knew he was going to be as popular as he was. But he was smart. I think he can see like, oh, this guy's going to keep me down, So I better not tell him about my oncoming series, Urban Animal. Speaking of, it's on Webtoons right now. You are going
Yes.
to do you prompt your readership to say, hey, we have a break coming,
Yeah.
right? And do you foresee any sort of like, well, not to say foresee, but are you more like you have a bit of anxiety that the readership is going to drop down, that you're taking this break, anything like that at all? Anything that Shawn would probably ask you to make this stream more dour and like go towards like the
Should I
monochrome
just
side?
be in black and white this whole stream?
It's coming. It's coming. Don't worry, Shawn. You don't have to ask for permission. It's coming.
Is that really a Sean Crystal question? Is that something you would ask?
Oh, it is absolutely Shawn Crystal question. It just happens to have me riding on the back of that pony.
I
But
have
go ahead.
questions. That's not one. But
I
go.
guess, yeah. We're always worried, right? That the storyline isn't gonna hook readers or whatever. And yeah, over time, it's 5 years is a long time. You're gonna lose steam every now and then. You're gonna gain readers again every now and then. Every time a season premieres, we get a bump up because we get front page, and then our editors are kind enough to give us front page every time we have a new character or a big event happening in the story. People who read the comic who are watching this are very familiar with the fact that sometimes we will show that new character on the front page banner of the app, so just to hook them and to like tease them about what's coming. But as for being worried, not necessarily at this point. We are telling, well, we've known for a long time that we are telling the story that we want to tell, and not adjusting it for the readers who want certain arcs or certain characters to pivot a certain way. We have a very clear vision as to where we want the series to go, and possibly when Urban Animal ends, and it ends definitely a certain way, it's possible that we'll even expand the story after that. Possibly not even on Webtoon, but that's a discussion for future John.
John, can you talk to me about just artistically what it's like to work for Vertical Scroll versus like the print comics you did before that? Was it a challenge to transition?
Yeah, it's a challenge per se, but at the same time, it opens up opportunities for you. The limitations are that uh, a double page spread doesn't really read very well on a vertical scroll, because one option is the reader will need to like flip their phone like this if you want to display it like that, but then that destroys the immersion a little bit, right? Or you just maintain it as a straight up panel, and then it just looks tiny across the center of the screen.
Right.
So I basically realized that as early as episode 2 or 3. So I didn't do any wide shots anymore. I didn't do any quote unquote double page spreads. And just like, if I wanted something to look cinematic, I needed to figure out an interesting angle, at least to deliver that shot with. But what the vertical scroll or the digital format gives you is an unlimited gutter. And I mentioned this in another interview a couple of years back. But what that gives you is full control of the pace. So if you've got a scary scene or suspenseful scene, you have the freedom to really put some real distance in between the panels to sort of build up that tension.
Right.
And that's something I have come to really enjoy playing with. And another thing I utilize, this is so inside baseball. I don't know if people.
No, that's good. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some baseball talk.
But like you know how in a regular comic, right, the panel is always white, just because it's a comic page. What I like doing on Urban Animal is never using white as our gutter. And what that does is it allows me to create some sort of spot color for the mood of the scene. So if it's a lighthearted scene where our main character Joe is heading to school, I'll use like like a light blue to show that
You're
it's a
gonna bring it up.
lighthearted,
Let's see if this works. Tell me when if you
happy
can see
scene.
this. Continue. Go
Oh,
ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
good,
yeah,
Eric. Good.
yeah. Something like this. I've got a black gutter because it is an ominous scene. Things are getting really intense here, and it's not very visible here in this particular sequence, but you can actually, because you have control of that gutter space, you can create a sort of gradient to transition readers from scene to scene. So if you've
Right.
got
I see
a
what you're saying.
light blue background in one, but the next scene is like a little more dour, you can gradient that from light blue to like a dark gray. And that can just hold the audience hand a little bit.
So you're no longer, when you're working this way, you're no longer thinking in terms of pages. Are you just, so when you're laying this out, are you just thinking of the panels individually and not, and the distance between them, not so much like in a page, you're always thinking like what this one is like next to this one?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the panels individually, but I'm also thinking in terms of staging the scene. It's like a play pretty much, because you're not thinking about page count, because page count is not a number anymore. It's literally a moot point. There are no
Yeah.
pages here. So I just figure out the scene itself, where all the characters are standing, how they're positioned in relation to each other, and how I can position the camera so that a vertical scroll can actually depict that properly, with keeping all the lettering in mind, because I don't want to give our letterer a hard time. That
Yeah.
brings up another challenge, right? With a vertical scroll, the page itself is very narrow,
Right.
so you really need to think about balloon placements, or
Okay.
like consider it in advance at least.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, for me, I always in my thumbnails consider balloon placement. Do you think about that in that stage?
What are you talking about, dude? Balloon placement. People aren't there to read my shit. They're there to look at it. What are you talking about? That's not a me problem. That's a my letterer problem. That's a my editor
That's what I'm
problem.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finding this format really interesting.
This
It
is like,
is.
do you akin it to like I found footage of like old school television, John. By the way, that's an awkward way to here we're gonna put it like just like that. Um I found old footage of like televised programming back when TVs were like, and were square in format.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And then you don't even
I
remember
remember.
it anymore once you start getting these, 16 by 9 or these weird, these larger aspect rate. What is this? What is it now? The televisions.
16:9.
Anyway, right. And like you take a look back at that footage and you're like, oh wow, everything was composed to be a square,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that when you see something in, like, for instance, when you watch, there's a reason why they invented things like pan and scan. And so my brain consistently composes for that 16 by 9 aspect ratio, if not even wider. You're having to sort of like revert back into a version that is, first of all, optimizing for the vertical scroll experience, but it's almost like the opposite, or actually it's the turned over version of 16 by 9, where
What do you
everything
mean?
is more portrait as opposed to landscape, right?
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. How tough is
John,
that, man? What a
yeah,
pain.
yeah.
It it can be tough for sure. I'm always finding myself, uh when I'm actually working on the panels, I always find myself getting frustrated at how much more I want to show.
Mhm.
But then at the end of the day, the story is the more important thing, right? One day we'll get to do a remaster, I hope, of this thing, where I get to do as much, cinematic scenes as I want. But right now we just want to get the story out.
So you would actually redraw it?
I don't know about that, but there's probably some scenes that I would add, extend panels for,
Okay.
just
Okay.
to make it a little more cinematic.
Am I
So
ruining this for your fan base if I'm scrolling through it?
No, this is fine.
my
This is
question is, as we're scrolling, well, I guess this kind of answers it. Are you considering the shape of your panel to match a phone?
yes.
Okay.
I
So like
am.
here you chose a square.
Sean sounds like a dad that's like trying to figure out Instagram. So it's all you post a square. It doesn't.
No, I mean the panel itself. Like that was a square panel we just saw. But like,
Yes.
are you thinking like this whole panel will take up the whole phone, and then you scroll to the next one?
Yes, I have a template that is roughly the size of the largest phone screen. And what that template does is it shows me how big the image needs to be if I want the reader to actually linger on that image.
Okay.
And what's
Yeah.
useful about that template as well is it allows me to create a gutter space that's also the size of the phone screen, which forces the reader to see nothing for a little bit, and
Okay.
that helps build up tension.
Can I tell you something about that, Sean? Like John Amor's not here, right? Because he's our guest, but I'm gonna assume for a minute that he's not on screen.
Yeah.
John is like one of the most prepared to the point of boring guys that I have ever met in my entire life. Like the fact that he can sit there and be like, I have the largest template phone, blah blah, like all of those things. You know what I mean? He's worse than fucking Hannibal from the A-Team. You know, it's just like overly prepared for the end. So I'll say, like, Sean and I had been meaning to put together a podcast that is half talking about his stuff and half talking about my stuff, and he's gonna end up splitting it the way he sees fit. The way I talk to you and Mateo is just kind of like, hey, we're at the studio somewhere, we're at the coffee shop somewhere. So we shot our very first shot. We recorded our very first one, which is only going to be in like 10 to 15 minute segments. And as soon as I got on the phone with John, John had like a list of the things that he wanted to talk about. It was so on brand and simultaneously off-putting. You know what I mean? Because like what I'd gotten accustomed to is just what we do. You know, bring somebody on, we chit chat for a little bit, whatever comes to mind comes to mind. John was not like that at all. John had like subject matters, and he kept putting things back on the rails. You know what I mean? He's like, so let's talk about your blah blah blah, and it's like it's like annoying, but like I said, it's on brand. It's so prepared to the point of like, I don't need to be here. You know, like you can just run this thing and have me answer in survey form. You know what I mean? Like you have 3 things that you can talk about, and I prefer one of those 3. Check off the box, and I'll talk about them on your behalf. You know. So again, it wasn't a surprise when John just said, "I have a template for this." As a matter of fact,
but
I suspect that he has a template for this
I'm not
conversation. You know, like John, be honest. Is there things that you want on your screen right now that you're like, I need to hit these bullet point talking points? Is it not even on your screen? It's on your hand.
It's interesting that you bring up our recording, Eric, because I do have a YouTube channel called Johnny Makes Comics.
See?
If you're
Look at
watching
that.
this right,
Good plug. Good plug.
go ahead and subscribe. You can find me on the search bar, I guess. I talk about comics and anime
So gross.
and making comics.
Get that out.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. You had a question, Sean, to just kind of keep this thing going.
Yeah, I had a few questions. Well, one, I mean, I was going to say that John sounds a little type A, and that's not too far from me. It's like I can over prepare myself.
Yeah.
But the question I wanted to get, just going back to where we were a second ago, was your gutter sizes. You play with the size of the gutter because you said you like to build some tension by forcing the reader to scroll a little bit.
Yeah.
And then
I'm laughing because I'm realizing it's like a couple type A's talking, and I don't need to be here. One more thing. Right before, it was like 2 hours before this fucking podcast, right? Before this recording, John is already messaging me going 2 hours, right? It's coming. It's 2 hours from now.
Did you
I just wanted to get the time zones right. The time zones are always
probably
listening.
less than, pal. You know, because it's gonna.
I'm
it's
the
gonna
middle
be whatever.
ground between Eric and John. I'm not that bad.
You guys are gonna be great. Keep talking about gutter sizes. I'm gonna check my email. I'll be back in a few minutes.
So you'll shrink down the gutter sizes to speed up the pacing and to
I will.
release tension and all that.
And little things like if I know it's a talking head scene, I will put as little a gutter as possible just so the reader knows that, oh, this conversation continues, just keep scrolling, just keep scrolling,
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
just to sort of tell them that
I
some
got you.
more of this is coming up. Don't get too bored with it because it's an action comic, and Talking Heads doesn't necessarily engage everybody.
Right.
But
And
yeah,
you literally have limitless space you can use for each chapter.
yes. Sometimes we will go. Sometimes we will go more than 40 panels if the story demands it week to
Mhm.
week. But yeah, 40 is the quota that we try to hit every week, definitely.
That's a
And
lot.
it is. It roughly translates to what, 8 pages a week
Yeah.
colored.
Yeah, that's a lot. Eric, you ready for that type of schedule?
I'm not even paying attention. I'm trying to sign into my Etsy. Am I
So
ready for that kind of schedule? No, nobody should be prepared for that
no,
kind of schedule. But I found that in the X amount of years that John has been doing this, he's been kind enough to share some of his behind the scenes process work. John has developed sort of a production version. I akin it to like Paul Smith from like back in the day. Paul
mhm,
Smith always wanted to draw like Alex Raymond for X-Men. That was actually the style that he's wanted since he's wanted. That's how he broke into the industry. If you take a look at some of that Marvel Age stuff that he was working on
right,
before he got into comics, it's a little bit more rendered, right?
right,
And then when he finally got the X-Men book, he realized back when monthly deadlines were important, not just because of, obviously income, but and by proxy reputation to be able to be a monthly artist back when that was important in mainstream comics. He came up with a style that we've come to know from that X-Men run, which
right,
to me is stronger. I know that sounds blasphemous to some, but it seems stronger than the stuff that he did for Golden Age, which he proclaimed to be the style that he'd always wanted to do for
right.
comics.
And
Right,
I'll
the
agree
stuff that
with
he was
you.
working
I
when he
think
was working with James Robinson,
yeah,
right?
like Leave It to Chance for me was like that's Paul at his best, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
similar to the X-Men stuff.
Similar,
Mhm.
right? So I think when he like that's the thing that he needed to, the mechanism that he needed to facilitate or invent for himself so that he could maintain that monthly schedule. And John has come up with something like that for Urban Animal because he knew he needed to be able to crank these things. I give him a hard time a lot for copy and paste, but I understand that that's a critical like lever or button that you have to push. But
Sure.
it does not encompass all of Urban Animal, right? So, John,
No.
can you talk briefly about some of the things that you're like, hey, I need to, all the things that you ran off where you was it a discovery for you from the beginning? I needed to simplify, or was it like something that you sort of like slowly came to and now you're in a point where you're in a groove 5 years later?
Yeah, I can touch on that. Can we scroll down? This
I don't
panel is
want to.
creeping me out.
I want this panel to be
I
the
do want to
entire
note those
podcast.
the highlights on the eyes are a nice touch. I like
All
for
right,
Cute.
listen, I'm gonna stop this now and then you can talk. Here we go. There we go.
Yeah. So your question is touching on the copy and paste. So I'm a big anime fan, and when they
Yuck.
need to when they need to take some shortcuts, what they do, right, is the limited animation where it's just the head that's static, and then it's just the eyes and mouth that are moving, and that's
right,
literally all they animate. um I've I had to figure out early on in season one that I need to make some shortcuts if I'm gonna hit this 40 panel schedule every week. And what I did was I created templates for each character talking in different angles with no eyes and no mouth.
okay.
And that was just line art. And what I could do is he left.
We'll be back. We'll be back.
So what that means is I can pretty much just take a template for each character and draw whatever emotion or uh, whatever the general situation is, yeah, expression, and light it differently as well. Something interesting also at season one is I was not great at coloring, and I needed to develop a sort of like limited palette technique as early as season one, just so that I
It's
could
really smart, dude.
thanks
Yeah.
man, I need to crank these out. And then like it was Spider Verse actually that helped me figure it out, because like if I can just figure out a way to depict backgrounds with color shapes, I guess uh, Chuck Jones cartoons also was an
Yeah.
inspiration. But like if I could figure out a way to depict objects in the distance as just color shapes, like trees, buildings, cars, or whatever, I wouldn't need to go into too much detail drawing all that stuff, and I could just focus on the characters, who I also had shortcuts for. So the process, figuring out the process, really helps, and just sticking to the pipeline. You know, at this point, it would be harder to have an assistant than to just do it all by myself.
Right, I get that. I get that. Well, looking back at the work you've done over the 5 years you've been working, I guess one of the fears I have with my
We go.
work
Here we
is to
go.
develop a what?
Here we
Here we
go.
go.
Get your blades
Develop
ready.
a shorthand for me with shortcuts and stuff. I feel like the work won't look good. And so I
Hmm.
want to know, looking back at 5 years, are you happy with the shorthand you've developed and how it came out?
Okay, so season 5 at this point, and then occasionally I will need to go back to season 1 and 2 panels, because I will look at like, is this a panel that exists? Can I copy it and just change the lighting? I'll literally need to look at those folders almost every day,
So you've got a
and
massive hard drive.
I do, and backups, massive backups at this point.
Sure.
But like, I definitely feel like I've gotten better at as a draftsman across the seasons. But more than that, I've definitely felt like I've grown as a colorist. Uh,
Sure.
I, I don't know how to paint necessarily, but like being learning how to tell a story with just color at this point is definitely a strength that I'm very proud of. I wish my illustration skill improved at the same pace, but at the end of the day, our priority was just getting the book out every week
Right, right,
and
right.
tell the story.
I get that.
Sean, can I ask you, is this what you were expecting when you came on here? Like being asked probably the same exact set of questions that you've been asked in like multiple other podcasts that you've been on.
Hold on.
How much of this is like stuff that you already have in your back pocket that you already like? I know
No.
I've answered this question 10 times already.
I'll be completely honest with you. Every time there's an urban animal interview, it's for like, it's for the Kickstarter, or it's the
Mm.
fact that you're transferring to webtoon from comics. It's very refreshing to be able to talk about like process stuff, which is
Exactly,
Yeah.
why
Eric.
I was worried. I was like, this is too much. Is this too inside baseball? But then I'm
Yeah.
among friends, so
Yeah,
why
and
not?
honestly, the readers really, the listeners do
I gotta
enjoy.
go. I gotta go.
The listeners do enjoy that aspect of the show when we go in
I hope
deep into the
so.
process and stuff. It's a big
No, I
thing.
don't think it's inside baseball at all. As a matter of fact, it's still in theme to what Sean started the podcast for. I'm just, sometimes I'm always curious to know where somebody's headspace is when it comes to like talking about process. Because sometimes, like for me,
Yeah.
we can end up talking about process, but Sean is the one that's like really nerdy about it. Like the both of you, I could probably leave right now, come back in about 45 minutes. You guys will still be talking. As a matter of fact, I really want to leave right now and come
Dude,
back
I
in
love
45 minutes.
talking process. It's my
I know,
favorite thing.
and that much I know about you. So you and Sean are gonna be just fine. So I thought like if it's a new
Okay, Eric.
Filipino that you want, Sean, you got him. You know what I mean?
John,
You
we're
can
gonna get
have
rid
him.
of
He's
Eric.
good to go. He says he's awake this time of night anyway. He's not like me that I just want to pass out halfway through the freaking whatever it is. And here's the part about and I think it mirrors yours in a different way, Sean, but John is still enthusiastic about making comics. I
Yeah.
mean, he really, really likes it. He's really into it, like I've heard him geek out over stuff that what should feel like old hat, yours, and it's similar with you, Sean, because sometimes it just takes a little bit to rekindle. You kind of come up from a place of like, I've seen this magic act before. But what's great about it is like, I think between the two of you being in the same room, it's like seeing kids at Disneyland for like the first time. It's gonna be great. So if I can somehow plus 10, plus 100 John's like resume to get my spot on this podcast, I'm on board. He's going to inject with the right amount of energy talking about process as opposed to the cynicism that I bring every single annoying week that
Well,
we
Eric, I
work
think what we
together.
should do is we should just have you on the bench, like
Is that what you
basketball.
know?
So then, when we need the cynicism, we can just pull you in the game.
I don't think you ever need the cynicism.
No, I think that's.
Let me go
that's
back
a nice
and
touch.
just highlight the fact that John is like really, really super into comic books. It's sort of like when I first met him, I think he had to temper expectations because he realized I was so not into making comic books, or at the very least, talking the BS that you guys are talking about right now. So it's an amazing sort of outlet for him to be able to say, "Hey, let me talk about my process in making this vertical scroll thing." You're lobbing so many amazing questions, and I'd forgotten how good you were at this, Sean.
Yes.
Just like talking about these kinds of processes. So please continue. I'm going to continue. I'm going to move on with like these emails. Go ahead, you guys. Go, go, go.
I
You guys are doing great.
remember, I remember years ago when I first actually started talking to Eric. Uh, it's like he was like, "Hey, so John, you make comics, right? That's your full time thing. You make comics." Yeah, man. I'm working on this series. I'm really into it. I'm enjoying the process. And then he was like, "That's stupid." It's like,
Sounds like
thanks,
Eric.
man. Big fan.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
What a
You
stupid
know what they say,
mistake.
John? Be careful
Continue
about
making
meeting
comics.
people that you enjoy their work of and heroes and such, because they'll
I
disappoint you.
Listen,
Yeah.
speaking of heroes, we've been trying to we, as in me and my multiple personalities, have been trying to convince John to come
Mhm.
out to the United States and join us for one of these shows. At one point, pre-Dark Times, we had circled it on our calendars for it to be Heroes
Yeah.
because, Sean, you can speak to this, right? We love that show,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, historically, went to that show not because of the show itself, but that was the spot for us between, and by us I mean you, me, Mateo, and whoever else was dumb enough to
Yeah.
join us, like to go there and really enjoy, because it didn't come off like a comic book show. I suspect, I haven't been there in a couple of years. It's still, the spirit of that still exists
Yeah, it's
today. I
still
don't
there.
know what
It's
is.
still the same.
Yeah, I mean, Shelton puts on a really, really good show, takes great care of us when we are there, and
Yeah.
more importantly, the city is not. It's not like the other ones that we've gone to. Every city has its own vibe, but I appreciate Charlotte for the vibe that it presents, which is a little bit slower. This is, we're talking about like after hours, right? I don't particularly care, and this is not going to come to a surprise as a surprise to anybody, but I don't particularly care for the after hours, like hanging out at the bar or whatever. But that's never been my scene. But when we go out to dinner, when we go out and hang out any place, but I guess this is similar to every city that we end up. But Heroes in particular, I really like hanging out that show.
It's easy.
So,
It's an
yeah,
easy show to do.
yeah.
Like everything's very close to the convention center, and it's not like such a massive show that there's hordes of people in the streets.
Yeah. And so I've been trying to convince John to make his way out. I kind of want to put him on the spot and say, "Hey, John, what the hell is taking so long?
I'm ready,
What is
dude.
going on? Are you?"
Now that Urban Animal is wrapping up and the schedule is opening up as well, I would definitely love to go. And I've definitely taken the steps already, preparing all that stuff, like passport and stuff. So we're looking at next year, June. We're already June now, so
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
gonna
Yeah.
be tough. Um, Aside from Urban Animal ending, I've sort of resharpened my traditional art skills, I guess you could say. Through my dealer, Next Comic Art, I've been able to actually get busy with that stuff again. If you've been working, digital comics for 5, 6 years, that stuff sort of gets rusty. And so
I
I
was
would
going to
love
ask about
to,
that.
yeah, I would love to go to Heroes, but with stuff to bring.
Sure, of
So
course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's an expensive trip for you to make, I'd imagine. So you want to
yeah.
be able to make that back.
Mm-hmm.
So you all the time on Urban Animal, I'm assuming you weren't doing anything traditionally, mainly because of time.
Well, I had already been mainly a digital artist before Urban Animals started,
Okay.
but like just recently, I've wanted to just get back to the roots, and as I've discussed with Eric in previous discussions, like I've tried Zipatone for the first time.
Oh,
I'm
nice,
not I'm not a great inker, so I want to start playing with like ink wash at least, just that
nice.
stuff. Because that stuff. So I've been enjoying a lot of ink pulp videos. Have you heard of that dude on Instagram? He's pretty good. He's pretty good with a brush.
Oh shit! This is so
You
bad.
hear that?
So yeah. All that process stuff has been really helpful. I want to get better at traditional art, but uh, I still always love just putting out full comics per se. So
And
uh,
digital is much faster for you, I'm assuming.
yeah, it also gives me more control. There's no colorist to fuck it up, just me messing it messing it up. I don't know.
What software do you mainly use?
I was a dinosaur sticking with Manga Studio for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
then it just stopped working on Windows 10, so I had to adapt and learn CSP
Mm-hmm.
just this year. And then I would like to experiment with Procreate soon, which I have
Okay.
not had the opportunity to yet.
Eric, you've used Procreate? Is that what you
That's
use
his
for your
main
book?
thing.
Right? I don't know. I don't use too much software.
I'm sorry. I was someplace else for a hot minute as you guys were talking process. Something manga,
You
something
use Procreate,
traditional art,
correct?
something Zipatone. Let's step back, John.
Oh, here we go.
What is it that prevented you from? Was it? I want to go back to Sean's question earlier, which is, did you decide to be prime? Well, you had said that historically you'd been primarily a digital guy for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
Probably for the lack of tools. There's nothing in the Philippines, right? There's you guys only. There's no.
There's no pencils.
Yeah. Sometimes I need
Now,
to.
so what was it that led you down that path? It's interesting for me. For like, whenever here's the reason why I bring this up is because Sean and Mateo, nerds that they are, will end up talking about like brushes ad
Yeah.
nauseum. It just makes my stomach turn. Like they talk about how they. By the way, if there are like a lot of dead minks and sables out there, it's because these two just depopulated that
They have
entire sort of
ceremonies where
sub.
they sacrifice their lives to the gods of brush inking.
They do. They do. There's like a bed of
They have an
spikes out in the
altar with
middle of mink
tail.
land, and they jump off of platforms so these guys can have their really, really expensive brush. Anyway, they stockpile this stuff, and they'll talk about
Yeah.
everywhere that they've gone into like the weirdest part of Siberia, just to like, is this the right mink, and can we now start making brushes out of it? It's really awful, right? But that's
Mm,
and when they talk to me about it, it's a lost cause because I grew up on used up computer paper, dot matrix printer paper, and
same.
whatever it is that I could find in the at the local Staples, local art supply store. I didn't even have that. I had like an office supply store. So I'm curious to know what got you into doing everything digital. Is it because it was just most comfortable for you? Is it because it's what you grew up on? What was the thing that made you go, hey, digital is the way? And now you're trying to find your way back into doing more traditional pieces.
Honestly, my first few books via Image and IDW, they were drawn completely traditional.
Mhm.
And then when I found out that, well, when I realized that I could adjust and that I was, actually good enough to adjust, because some people just aren't able to,
Mhm. Sure.
right? When I realized that I could adjust if I had just taken like a month, which I did, uh, drawing digitally is faster, and I would never need to scan ever again, which I hate.
Right. Right.
Um,
Why do you hate scanning?
it's just
Because it
it's
slows you
so
down.
yeah, but it's like working hard to show something that you can already show. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand
No,
what you're saying.
no, I don't. Both of you understand it, but I hate that explanation. The fact that you tried to use less words and it got me to, I'm going to ask you to use more words. It's
It's just
so weird.
laborious. It's
Yeah,
just
there it
laborious.
is. You could have gone with that. You could have gone with that. You could have gone with that. It's just labor. 3 words, but you went with like 5 of them that made no sense. We just came back to it's just laborious.
I wish there was a fun way to do it. There just isn't one.
There, that's even better. See how that's like
You
a
said earlier hiring an assistant would slow you down, but that's
Yeah.
an area where you could have an assistant take care of you.
Just to scan stuff?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
know
but then
people-
I would need to draw traditionally, which makes
Right.
me slow.
I'm here to
John-
fuck up your whole process.
Yeah. Sean's just here to to sell you on his sable brush business that he's soon to announce on that ink pulp instruction thing that you were talking about.
Eric, do you
All
know
right,
how
so-
to ink with a brush? Because I've never tried.
I
Do
do.
you know how to?
I do. It's
Really?
your words are it's laborious is accurate. It's just a giant pain in the butt. Only because, and I think you can think you can relate to this, John. I'm all about like efficiency. By the way, let's not lose track about the fact that how hard it is to there's something to be said about doing something for 5 years and be disciplined enough to understand that you've got to do it for 5 years, right? And I think there's a there's an audience out there that are watching this show, the ones that we don't pay for, like the people who are watching this
Our
show,
5 viewers.
who are really into the idea of making their own comics, right?
Yes.
Finding their way through it, and somehow finding relevance in that space. And I can't highlight enough, one of those formulas, and it's tried and true, right, is to actually get the work done. You can talk about social media, you can talk about, the process, you can talk about all the nerdy shit you guys are talking about right now when it comes to like tools, whatever. But at the end of the day, get the comics done. Because I'm going to say that between the time that you started and the time that you are right now, especially now that it's almost transformative for you to say, hey, I want to go back and start doing traditional stuff again. You've learned so much about that craft to go like, I didn't know how to do this back in the day. I know how to do this now. And that
Yeah.
only came in, and this stuff that Shawn and I were talking about offline, is like you've got to put in the reps to be able to get into a space in which you are uncomfortable at first, but ultimately comfortable with that thing that you were uncomfortable with, and always finding things to become uncomfortable about. We shouldn't, like, you guys glossed over it. You guys use like an extra, like a lot of words to get to the point of like, you've been doing this for 5 years, like a lot, consistently for 5 years, maybe here, in between season breaks. And right now, like you said, special circumstances compels you to take a break, but this is 5 years worth of work. And I'm going to guess that in those 5 years, you've done so much growth in your craft, and just in the making of comics, which is something
Yeah.
completely something completely different than just drawing like a
Absolutely.
piece of fan art.
Absolutely.
Making comics is a different muscle set, because there's decision making in there that you have to do panel by panel that you don't
Yeah.
do when it comes to just like drawing the piece of fan art of like Superman flying or Batman swinging around.
Yeah. What's interesting about that also, aside from the, learning to just commit and make comics, uh, something interesting that I learned too over the past 5 years, which is, you can learn it in increments, I guess, but doing it in a long-term project is the best way, I think. Trusting your creative gut is something that I learned to do as well. Like, when you're pitching a series to an Image or whoever, you don't necessarily know that your story is any good. You just like it,
Right.
and you, for whatever reason, you believe in it and you want to do it. Maybe you're just looking forward to drawing it because it's got some cool characters in it. But like, over the course of 5 years, co-writing this thing, I've learned to trust that I know how to do it, and it's inspiring for whatever I decide to do next, and it makes it a lot less scary. It's still scary, but less so. I've felt.
You hear that, Shawn? It's less scary. I think that's one of the reasons why Shawn brought you on. I want to go back to this point. It was not my idea to have you on this show. As a matter of fact, if it were up to me, it would be you, Shawn, and Mateo, because they would set you up really, really nicely. Whereas I'm trying to take you down at the knees, right? But it was actually Shawn's idea to say, hey, let's bring on John, because I think there is a kinship between the two of you based on what you have been doing, John, versus the space that Shawn wants to go, the endeavor that Shawn wants
Sure.
to go into,
Sure.
right? So Shawn is in really hardcore research mode right now, and I think
Mm.
that statement that you just said is going to land with him, probably not immediately. If it hasn't, if it has, it's landing with him like lightly, but
Yeah.
like a couple of days from now, it's going to land with him profoundly. So I
Yeah.
think that's why he brought you on. I don't care,
So what
Your
brings you on?
enthusiasm.
Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I guess what I was trying to say is that your enthusiasm sort of shines through in whatever you're working on, and like, if you're a fan of the story you're trying to tell, people see that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something I noticed the opposite side of when in the last few years of me working freelance for publishers, the excitement was gone. The scripts were just completely uninspiring, and the companies were not fun to work for.
Mm.
And my work suffered from it, no doubt.
See that left turn? He just jerked the fucking bus into an unpaved road and is currently looking for a cliff for us to just like kamikaze right off of. You know?
I think, Eric, you're the one that derails this conversation more than
I did not. I'm trying to keep things as positive within my character, right? As
Within
positive as
my
I
character,
can.
that's the bold letter caveat there. Within my character.
Yeah. But at the very least, yeah. Anyway, so it's positive, but within character. You know what I mean? Within brand. I
I
suppose
think
you're
that's
not.
a
You're not.
I think that's a good feeling, right? I think it was Matt Fraction that said it. I'm not, or maybe he was quoting somebody else in an interview. But like, if it feels scary to do, it's probably the right thing to do. He said.
Yeah.
And
You hear that,
this was,
Sean? If it feels scary to do, it's probably the right thing to do.
Eric.
You should fly John Moore over to your place and just hang out for a month and a half, and the both of you guys can learn kid and play dance moves, all with the toe taps. You know what I mean? You guys are perfectly. You guys are drift compatible. You take one
I
half
think
of the robot.
I think that was for you.
No,
That was, you need
mm,
I am. That's the reason why my cynicism is shined so perfectly through, because I remain stupid and unscared about everything. So everything comes off with like a polish of malaise, and I can.
polish of delays.
That's my next sketchbook title, by the way. Polish of malaise.
I like that. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I thought it was Ben and Jerry's flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. It only gets released once a year because they sell like one unit. And it's to me, like one pint, and it's to me.
Nobody wants to make it. Nobody wants to buy it.
Nobody wants to invest in it. It's like $50 a pint.
So, John.
So go ahead, John. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
With Urban Animal Rapping, you had mentioned you're putting your mind to future endeavors. Do you want to speak on anything in that regards?
Well, I'm already working on some Arc Athena stuff. I believe, Eric, that's okay to bring up, right? I've already tweeted about it.
All right. Okay.
Mention it
There
to
we
everybody.
I've been trying to keep it quiet because I don't know what the pages look like. Honestly, John's been working in the black box. He says, "Hey, I'm done with X amount of layouts." I don't get to see a single image of it. I just have to trust.
Coming.
Like, I guess it's gonna be good.
It's coming.
It's
I'm working on Arc Athena stuff. It's a story that happens within the series and I guess outside the series as well, in time wise.
Mm-hmm.
Eric and I are still planning about how to publish it, where to publish it, but those are discussions that'll come later on. And aside from urban animal stuff, I guess when
Does
it
that drive
wraps
you
up,
nuts, John? The fact that there is no plan, like the fact that I'm just like, we're just gonna have it. You know what I mean? We're gonna have it locked and loaded, ready in the gun. And John is like, I don't know why I'm working so hard on these fucking pages. There is no contingency. There is no backup. There is no safety valve.
Well, you're gonna hate this, Eric, but we're gonna get all cushy about it. But I've been wanting to work with you for years, so this is fun. This is a dream come true for me, Eric. This is awesome. This is a dream come true.
This is what do you call it? This is Malaise ice cream all over again, man.
And then
it's actually a great pleasure to be able to work with my friends. I think I didn't quite understand what that was like way back in the day when you'd hear other creators that I looked up to, guys like, especially people who opened up their own studios, guys like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee. It's, when it made it easier to work on stuff if you're working with your buddies because they understand how important it is to you. But also it's like just a bunch of dudes drawing,
Right.
like it's a bunch of dudes drawing each other's stuff. So the idea for this, and thankfully John took it on, was like, hey, you know how we'd read like backup stories from old school Image comic books that wasn't part of the main sort of storyline? And I spoke to you about this briefly, right, Sean? I said like, hey, Sean, are you interested? Do you have time? Is there something in your calendar that you can block out X amount and you're totally down to do it?
Yep.
First of all, it doesn't commit you to something that is specifically, there's a deadline window, like, hey, we've got to get this done tomorrow. So it's at your leisure and you can get it done as leisurely as you want to. But also it's just like, I want my friends to draw my stuff. I mean, I know that's coming from like a super selfish place, but it's also comes from a place of like, yeah, it's just a bunch of dudes drawing, it's a bunch of people who are interested in. It's a lot of fun. It's meant to just be fun, and it just happens to be that it's going to get published someplace else. So it may sort of like make guys like you and guys like John, like I twitch, like there is no plan, is there? This potentially could just end up in a drawer somewhere. But in my heart, I'm like, I just want my friends to draw my shit. That's incredibly, egotistical and probably very, very selfish. But I think it's
No,
a
I
lot of
don't think
fun.
so. I think your friends like to celebrate your creations. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's exciting.
yeah. Anyway, what were you saying, Sean? You had a question,
No, I asked it.
and that's the end of this episode. Thank you, John, for coming. Yeah, we're, we're all freaking done. No, you were in the middle of explaining what's next for you after
Yeah.
Urban
Oh,
Animal, after Arcathena.
yeah, I'm also serializing a thing on Patreon called Big Medium, which is a a comic about making comics. So if you are a fan of manga
I like
like
that.
Bakuman, if you've heard of that, or if you've read things like Box Office Poison, which was about a comic book artist, it's sort of like that, except with a rom-com twist. So still working on the first issue. Layouts are done, and I've shared some script stuff as well on my Patreon. You can find me there just under John Amor.
So is this something you'll publish like in book format?
Eventually, I just want to like put it together first, you know.
Gotcha.
John pitched me this idea a little while ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." The moment he said rom-com twist, I was like,
Yeah, because Eric
"You're
has no
just,
soul.
you're just doing this for yourself, I suppose." You know, like. But watch it be the biggest fucking thing. Because again, when he pitched me an Urban Animal, I was like, "What does the guy? What is it? What's the premise?" Not to say I'd had any kind of like sign off on it, but he told me like, "Oh, here's this kid, and he transforms into a bunch of."
Listen, Eric. Yeah,
But
listen, Eric. It's Ben 10,
was
except it's
he
it's
was so
animals.
he was so into it. He was like again, and I just tried to put a rain cloud right over his head. But he's he's undoubtable. You know what I mean? Like he has just such a positive energy, and so every opportunity I get, I try to give him a little bit of dose of reality. But he's like, nope, I don't want to deal with the reality. I just want to deal with rom-com making comics. You
It's
know?
like
And I was like,
every week you embrace the Charlie Brown a little more.
yeah. It feels good. It's like a
You should just show up
warm,
in a yellow shirt with the jacket
inviting. So I've got the haircut for it. So it's just a matter of I've got the haircut and proportions for it. I might as well
and get
continue.
the good
You know,
grief in your vernacular. You'll be good.
John, did you mention where you can be found? I'm not trying to tie up the show, but can I tell you something about this podcast or podcasts in general? Do you ever hear like near the end of the podcast, people go like, "Where can people find you?" It comes off so put on and it's so formulaic. Let's do it in the middle. Well, middle end, so that like people have gotten this far. The
I
bot
have a
farms.
light. I have a light that flashes that tells me when it's time to plug.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring this up, but I just again on brand for you. We derail. Well, I derail. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk on Sean's behalf, but I derail, and it's somewhere in there. You just kind of slip in the fact that you have a Patreon and you can be
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
found
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
So let's get this out of the way because it's so disgusting. Your Patreon is where?
It's just John Amor. Look for John
Yeah.
Amor on Patreon. I'm the only one there. And then on
You've
Instagram,
killed everybody else. All the
yeah,
John
yeah.
Amores are dead.
It's like a the one situation. I've hunted down every John Amor variant, killed them disgustingly. And then on Instagram, I'm John_Amor because the one holding John Amor is my last target.
That's me.
It's,
That's
it's
me.
you,
I
Eric.
bought it. I
That's
bought
the
it
next
for
story. The
I
killing
bought
of
it
Adam
for
Moore.
a couple of KFC tickets and $10 and a couple. That's what I bought it for the guy. And then you're also on Instagram, right? You mentioned that already. Did you mention
Yep.
Twitter and you mentioned Patreon? How well? What are your thoughts about monetizing something like a Patreon, right? Because Sean and I think I'll give you context. Sean and I have always thought about like there are pre-existing platforms out there that help you monetize your work, like a Patreon, like a Kickstarter. But the part
Yeah.
that makes me nervous about that whole thing is the fact that it's at somebody else's behest. Effectively, somebody has their finger on a light switch that you can't control. So we've always spoken about how we want to bring things internally and
Yeah.
make things all about putting things in our own internal ecosystem. A perfect example, a couple of guests that we had previously was Carl, right? Carl has this. I think he has a version of the game plan of the playbook that I appreciate a lot. With Charles Christopher, his most current book that annoyingly Mateo has done a cover for. You know what I mean? Like Mateo does covers for everybody. It's just so, if he's not here and you guys get to talk shit about me when I'm not here, God, can that guy please stop? Just stop. Like John, tell me he's already got a cover for your rom com book, right? He's already working on it. He's already previewed it in his social media.
Yeah,
What
Mateo's
do you
social
think about?
media is look at the cover I'm doing for this and this and
Yeah,
this. It's a bit much now.
it's a lot
Ew,
now.
ew.
It's a lot.
Obnoxious.
Back off.
Yeah,
Back
yeah. I don't know what the Italian word is, but it's freaking annoying. What do you think about John? What do you think about first of all Mateo's annoying nuance of like doing covers for anything? Just put you on a tough spot. You're like the guest. Talk about your host.
off.
But what do you think about bringing everything into your own sort of like space and monetizing your sort of a creations there, John?
Well, something I learned about Webtoon is that at a certain level, if you're at a certain level in your career, the platform will always be more prominent than you.
Mm,
And then somewhere along the way, well, depending on how long you're working and what you're working on, your name becomes, it gains more of a cachet. So it
sure,
doesn't matter what the platform is.
sure.
I personally don't think my name is prominent enough to bring people in just yet.
Mm,
Urban
mm,
Animal has a lot of fans, but John Amor doesn't, not
mm,
necessarily.
yeah.
So I'm sticking with Patreon for now. I'm happy with how things are going there so far.
Well,
Maybe one
John,
day.
now that you've been on the INKPULP podcast,
True,
get
true,
ready.
true. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Flashing light over there. You see it too.
Eric.
I'm confident that after my Arcathena stuff comes out, it's just gonna. Oof.
The poof sound is your career disappearing. The poof sound is like the magician's poof of you
All
just
the
like throwing a
progress you'll make
smoke grenade.
from
Yeah.
being on the podcast will be taken back.
You know, it's
Yeah,
interesting to for you to mention that your name isn't bigger than the platform and by which it's associated with, and potentially even the title is associated with. I'm got two minds about that. One, absolutely agree. You have to you have to pull and push on the levers that's available to you, especially in this brand new or this relatively new space of like everything is just vying for your attention. It's a little bit
Yeah.
different than it was 10 years ago, right? When it wasn't too many things that was distracting you. People can actually pay attention to things like Blogspot and Blogger and so on. But
It's
these
tougher
days,
now.
yeah, absolutely. I would say 50 times is not if not 100 times tougher. But I'm also a huge proponent, and it takes longer, right? The climb up this road slash mountain is a little bit more arduous, a little bit more challenging. But I'm also a huge proponent of establishing yourself when and while you can, because
Yeah.
who knows what the future looks like. You almost have to future proof yourself against a Patreon, against
Yeah.
a webtoon, right? And again, I'm not throwing shade at any of those avenues, right?
Right.
I'm more looking at what does John Amore look like 10 years from now
Right.
if something like Patreon and something like webtoon doesn't exist, which might be a moot question to ask, a moot point to make because of the fact that it does exist and you are leveraging it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess with that in mind, what I'm trying to focus on now is making sure I have IPs under my name.
Mhm.
So should the opportunity arise later on, I have things that I can develop that I own.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
I
that answers
I think
the question.
I think developing it is really super important. I remember in most recent times when I first started talking about releasing Arcathena in print, that's when Zest World came around, right?
Yeah.
And if I've learned anything from that experience, number one, thank you so much to Zest World for investing in the title, putting it on their platform. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Um, People often don't realize that there are rarely any overnight successes that happen, you know?
Yeah.
And part of the ongoing success, or it's like this thing where you go that level of discoverability, and this goes back to what you're talking about, John, is being prepared for it. And that's what I'd learned with Zestworld. Zestworld didn't come around, and I think that's one of the main reasons why it was such a fascinating acquisition for them, is whereas they found a lot of these creators who already have their brands to them, on the launch creators that they had, what was it, like 18 plus months ago. They didn't necessarily have the titles, they didn't necessarily have the content in hand. They had the creators, but they still needed to generate it, whereas Arc Athena was already done. So that was a fascinating, really, I would think, sort of like help sort of grease the wheels, so to speak, in getting that deal done, because in a way I was prepared for it. And I think that's similar to the spirit that you're talking about, which is like, let me get a bunch of stuff ready, locked and loaded, so that when the opportunity comes around the corner, it's, it's a no-brainer to go like, oh, we like you from X, Y, and Z. What else do you have? Well, I have this. And it's already 20, 30, 40, 70%, 90% done. And it's just waiting for the opportunity to get released out there. So if there's anything that I can impart, do more of that to, impart to the audience who are listening. Do more of that. Be prepared for opportunity. Don't wait for opportunity to come around and be like, oh, so what do you have? It's so much more enticing for these, for these platforms, for these publishers, if you're already in part ready for that opportunity. You know what I mean? You're stacking the deck in your favor, because luck rarely happens sort of just like genuinely and organically. People need to be able to hear about it, and then when it finally presents itself, you're ready to take full advantage of it. And I think that's what you're alluding to in part, John.
Pretty much. And just find a fanboy in you, and make stuff that you as a fan would enjoy. Like, if you're sick of the stories that are coming out, you're not enjoying anything that the publishers or the filmmakers are putting out, make something that you would want. And chances are, if you have good taste, if you're not a complete idiot, people will enjoy what you make.
And even then, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can kind of read between the lines of how you just directed that specifically at me, John. It's weird, because typically I'm immune to that kind of bullshittery, but I got that one. That one hits a little closer to home. We were talking about this offline, by the way. I lost track of how long the thing is, but let's just talk. How long we're supposed to be online for, or recording, but let's just talk, because I like these conversations. It's not tools talk. It's not tool time with Shawn and John. It's talking about the actual process of like making stuff, tools. What a bunch of nerds. Shawn and I were talking about this a couple of days ago, where he's trying to project about what he's going to do next, right? And I remember telling him, like, just do, regardless of how clumsy it is, just put in the reps, right? And the analogy that I used was like, if you're in the gym and you put something on the bar, right? You're like, you have to get your body ready, even though it's heavy at first and stupid at first. Like, there's no way I can get this bar off the ground. You have to get your body ready, and especially like your central nervous system, to be like, I need to move this load, right? I need to be able to move this kind of weight, because that's what it gets used to. Right. So when we were talking about like what the next thing Shawn could potentially approach, we were talking about like, who cares what ultimately it is? If it's 2 pages, if it's 1 page, you need to start getting your brain trained to the idea that you need to move that weight. A lot of people want to wait for that like near stage of perfection, before they actually put pen to paper. And that's, I don't know of how many people that ultimately really, really, really works for.
I think it prevents most people from doing anything.
Yeah. And you often talk yourself out of it, rather than being able to say, I did the 3 pages. I learned a lot from those 3 pages, and going like, okay, now I'll do 6, and continuously put a bearing load that you're like, man, I can't, it's so difficult to do 6 pages. And next
even
thing
if
you know, 5 years.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, next thing you know, 5 years later, you have Urban Animal season, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
And like, if you're adopting that mentality of like needing the conditions to be perfect to actually work on the thing, even if it does come, rarely does it come consecutively. You know, it's never days in a row. Sometimes it's like one day in a month. You know, so things will never get done if you wait for perfect conditions all the time, and things will never
That's a
get
good
done
point.
if you aim for the perfect page all the time.
Right.
There are pages in Urban Animal that I'm happy with. There are pages in Urban Animal that I hate. I'm never gonna specify which ones they are, but like, yeah, at the end of the day, the important thing is just telling your story. That's what we are. We're storytellers.
Well, you guys are. You know what I mean? I'm a pinup artist that got bamboozled into thinking I can do like comic book pages, but
Please, please.
yeah.
No,
Hey.
you're the storyteller, Eric.
All right, kids. That's our time. We've already talked about where we can find John, right?
Yeah.
Patreon, Twitter, something underscore Amor. It's
Yeah.
really amazing. I hope
I'll
people
put it in the comments, all the links.
There you go. There is a
Yeah.
responsible podcaster. Sean, what are you doing next? What are you up to?
I am trying to get myself a new computer. That's my main focus right now.
That has been an ongoing offline conversation between me and
Yeah,
you. What's
I mean,
worth, what's not worth.
yeah, I
So
came
go
off
into
of
the
daily.
comments and tell Sean, give your guys his recommendation within budget. Don't have him buy something that's going to cost like a small mortgage.
And
But
don't
I've been,
talk
I,
to me about PCs because I don't have the time to learn that shit.
yeah. So just point Sean into an either M1, which is what I'm trying to like guide him through, or what he's trending towards, which is an M2, which isn't worth.
No, I'm not
whatever
looking
the
at
kind
any
of-
M2s
All right. Because
except
the
the
way
Mac
you're
Mini.
texting
The
to me,
Mac
it's like
Mini's.
M2 all day, every day.
What's that?
I said, when you're texting me, it's like M2 all day, every day.
No.
That's what it said.
I'm just
That's
trying
what I'm
to.
reading.
You're projecting that
All
onto
right.
me.
That's what I'm choosing to read.
Yeah.
So you want me to get an M2? That's what it's boiled down to. Like, no, Sean,
0%.
don't
Actually,
get the M2.
computers
People,
in general, just like,
for the viewers, comment below. What is the optimal computer for Sean to get for farming Bitcoin? That's the major
yeah,
concern.
because Sean is at the tail end of Bitcoin crypto farming, but he wants to
I'm going to
still get
jump in
into
right
it
now.
now that yes, when things are like ultra cheap to buy
timing, right?
freaking hardware. All right, that's it. What a pleasure! What a pleasure it is to always be here, even though I can't tell it in my voice. Even more so now that we got another Filipino on the podcast. I'm sure, Sean. When are we expecting to see this?
This will be out not next Monday, the Monday after, which I can give you a date. Let me open my calendar. It may take 5 minutes, but
Yeah, it may crash your computer.
no,
It may
we're
stop
past
this
the pressure. Oh
recording.
my God, it opened up. We are looking at this coming out on June 12th.
June 12th. All right, so
Independence Day in the Philippines, guys.
There you
You
go.
know that, Eric.
and no,
That's why we did this today, right?
Yeah,
0% did I ever know that. All right, kids, I'm gonna hit this bumper. John, thank you for being here. Sean, thank you
Thanks.
for
Thank you, John.
always putting this on. And I'm gonna hopefully I hit the outro instead of the intro this time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
This is the INKPULP podcast. This is the INKPULP podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.
Look at that. We did it. We pressed the right button.
Yay.
And hit this ending, and then we can start talking about all sorts of race.